My grandmother left me her legacy in the form of a greasy spoon diner, seasoned with 70 years of love and lard. My aunt, however, saw it as a teardown. She stole it from me with a forged signature, so I decided to steal its 5-star rating, one salt shaker at a time. The place was called the Sunny Side, and it was the only home I'd ever really known. Grams, Elena, raised me in the apartment upstairs, and my first memories are of the smell of sizzling bacon and brewing coffee, the clatter of ceramic plates, and the low hum of conversation from the regulars. She taught me how to crack an egg with one hand by the time I was 6, how to perfectly balance the salt and acid in her famous tomato soup by 10, and how to run the whole damn kitchen by 16. She'd stand behind me, her small, flour-dusted hands guiding mine. "The secret ingredient isn't in a jar, Leo," she'd whisper, her voice raspy with age and affection. "It's in here." And she'd tap my chest right over my heart. The Sunny Side wasn't just a business, it was a living, breathing part of our neighborhood. It was where couples had their first dates, where old men argued over politics and chess, where families celebrated birthdays with towers of pancakes drenched in syrup. Grams knew everyone's name, their orders, their stories. The diner was her love letter to the world, written in bacon grease and spilled coffee. When she passed, it felt like the world had lost its sun. The grief was a physical weight, a constant ache in my chest. But amidst the pain, there was a small comfort. She'd left the Sunny Side to me. It was all there in her will, clear as day. I was to be the one to carry her legacy, to keep the griddle hot and the coffee flowing. It was the only thing I'd ever wanted. That comfort lasted exactly 1 week, until the day of the will reading. I was there, along with my estranged Aunt Carol, Graham's only other living relative. Carol was my mother's sister, a woman who looked like she was perpetually smelling something unpleasant. She was all sharp angles and expensive, joyless clothing. She hadn't visited Graham's in over a decade, not even when she was sick. She'd always looked down on the diner, calling it that greasy little spoon with a thinly veiled sneer. Her lawyer, a man with a smile as slick as a used car salesman's, cleared his throat and presented a second document. A more recent will, he claimed, dated just a few months prior. This one left everything, including the diner, to Carol. My jaw hit the floor. I knew Grams would never do that. She and Carol hadn't spoken a civil word to each other since my mom's funeral. "This is a mistake," I stammered, my heart pounding. "My grandmother would never." "People change their minds, Leo," Carol said, not even bothering to look at me. She was already examining her nails. Perhaps she finally realized who her real family was. I looked at the signature on the document. It was shaky, distorted. It was close, but it wasn't Graham's elegant, looping script. It was a forgery. A clumsy one, at that. But my word against hers meant nothing without proof, and proof required a legal battle. A very, very expensive legal battle. I was 24, a line cook with a mountain of culinary school debt and a savings account that was laughable. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight a parking ticket, let alone a contested will. Carol knew that. She had planned for it. The next day, she had the locks changed. Just like that, I was shut out of my own home, my own life. I later found out her plan from Maria, the diner's head waitress who had been with Grams for 30 years and was more of a grandmother to me than Carol was an aunt. Maria had overheard Carol on the phone with a developer. The diner sat on a prime piece of corner real estate, perfect for a new high-rise condo. Carol's plan was simple: run the diner into the ground, devalue the business, then sell the land for a massive profit. She didn't care about the legacy, the community, or the memories. To her, it was just dirt. A cold, hard fury began to replace my grief. It started as a knot in my stomach and grew until it consumed me. She wasn't just trying to steal a building, she was trying to erase my grandmother, to bulldoze everything she had ever stood for. I couldn't let that happen. If I couldn't fight her in a courtroom, I would fight her in the only place I knew how: the kitchen. My plan was both incredibly simple and terrifyingly risky. I was going to get a job at my own diner and destroy it from the inside, just enough to make it unsellable to anyone but me. I would become the ghost in the machine, the saboteur in the kitchen, the architect of my aunt's failure. A week later, I saw a "Help Wanted" line cook sign taped to the front window. Carol had already fired two of the longtime cooks who had questioned her authority. I put on a baseball cap, pulled it down low, and walked in. Carol was sitting at the counter clacking away on a laptop, ignoring a handful of confused-looking customers. She glanced up, her eyes skimming over me without a flicker of recognition. I hadn't seen her in years, and to her, I was just another faceless kid looking for a job. "Experience?" she asked, her tone bored. "5 years," I said, my voice steady. "Everything from fine dining to short order." She grunted. "Pay is minimum wage. No benefits. You start tomorrow. Don't be late." And just like that, I was in. My first day back felt like a desecration. The air, which used to smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon, now had a stale, chemical tinge from the cheap cleaning supplies Carol had bought in bulk. The beautiful, worn-in wooden countertops were covered in garish plastic menus she'd had printed. She'd replaced Graham's beloved classic rock radio with a generic satellite station playing soulless pop music. But the real horror was in the kitchen. She had replaced the high-quality, locally sourced ingredients Graham's had insisted on with the cheapest industrial-grade stuff you could find. The butter was an oily, hydrogenated blend. The ground beef was pale and sad-looking. The coffee tasted like hot brown water. She was poisoning my grandmother's legacy, one cheap ingredient at a time. Maria found me in the walk-in cooler, staring at a giant tub of what was supposed to be mayonnaise but looked more like library paste. Her kind, wrinkled face was filled with a mixture of pity and rage. "Leo, honey, what are you doing?" she whispered, pulling the heavy door shut behind her. I explained my plan. I told her everything. How I was going to use Carol's own greed against her. How I would make the food just bad enough to drive people away, to tarnish the diner's reputation so thoroughly that no developer would touch it. Maria listened, her arms crossed. I expected her to try and talk me out of it, to tell me I was dishonoring my grandmother's memory. Instead, a slow, fierce smile spread across her face. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She always said you had her fighting spirit. What do you need me to do?" Maria became my eyes and ears on the floor. She'd let me know when Carol was coming, what she was complaining about, and which customers were the most influential. She was my co-conspirator, my ally in this strange culinary war. And so my campaign of petty revenge began. It was an art form, really. You couldn't just burn everything. The sabotage had to be subtle, insidious. It had to seem like incompetence, not malice. I started small. A little too much salt in the soup of the day. A batch of pancakes made with buttermilk that was just on the verge of turning sour. The toast would always be a shade too dark on one side. The home fries, once perfectly crispy and fluffy, were now often a little soggy, a little greasy. I'd accidentally leave the lid off the sugar container, allowing it to clump together in the humid kitchen air. Carol, who wouldn't know a spatula from a wrench, noticed nothing. She only cared about the bottom line. She'd stand in the kitchen doorway, pointing out ways we could cut corners. Use half an egg in the omelets, she'd say. No one will notice. Or that bacon is too thick. Slice it thinner. We can get more servings out of a pound. Each of her suggestions was a fresh stab in my heart, but they also played right into my hands. I followed her instructions to the letter, making sure the results were as unappetizing as possible. The half-egg omelets were thin and sad. The paper-thin bacon shattered into greasy shards when you looked at it. The regulars started to notice. I'd watch through the pass-through window as Mr. Henderson, a man who had eaten breakfast at the counter every day for 40 years, would pick at his food with a confused frown. I'd see families who used to laugh and share plates now leaving with half-eaten meals on the table. It was agony. I felt like I was poisoning my own family. But every time I felt a pang of guilt, I would picture Carol on the phone with that developer, laughing as she planned to turn my home into a pile of rubble. And the guilt would harden back into resolve. The next phase of my plan was to document the diner's downfall. I created an anonymous food blog called The Greasy Spoon Diaries. I framed it as a longtime customer mourning the slow death of their favorite spot. My first post was titled, "What Happened to the Sunny Side?" I've been coming to the sunny side since I was a kid, I wrote. It was a place you could count on. The coffee was strong, the bacon was crisp, and Elena, the owner, treated you like family. But Elena is gone now, and it seems she took the diner's soul with her. The coffee tastes like disappointment, the pancakes are flat, and the warmth that once filled this place has been replaced by a cold corporate chill. It's a tragedy playing out one greasy plate at a time. I took pictures of the sad-looking food and posted them. I wrote about the new, surly management, a thinly veiled portrait of Carol. I waxed nostalgic about the old days, about Graham's perfect apple pie and the way the sunlight used to hit the chrome napkin dispensers. I shared the post on local community forums and social media groups. It took off like a wildfire. People started sharing their own recent, terrible experiences at the diner. The comments section was a mix of outrage and mourning. The blog was going viral in our small city. I was creating a narrative, a public record of Carol's incompetence. I was turning public opinion against her, one heartbreaking post at a time. Carol, completely oblivious to the online world, just saw the dwindling number of customers. "People are just cheap these days," she'd complain, filing her nails at the counter. "We need to attract a new, younger crowd." Her solution was to modernize the menu. She wanted to add things like avocado toast and quinoa bowls. It was a disaster. She bought cheap, unripe avocados and watery, pre-cooked quinoa. The results were predictably disgusting. My blog had a field day. The Sunny Side's new avocado toast looks like something you'd scrape off the bottom of a lawnmower, I wrote, alongside a particularly unappetizing photo. It's a desperate, failed attempt to be something it's not. It's like watching your sweet old grandmother try to become a TikTok influencer. It's just sad. The blog was getting noticed. Local news outlets picked up the story of the beloved diner's mysterious decline. I was getting emails from people all over the city sharing their own stories of gentrification and the loss of local landmarks. I had tapped into a nerve. The tension in the diner was becoming unbearable. The few remaining staff were miserable. Carol was constantly yelling, her frustration mounting as profits plummeted. She was getting more and more desperate, which made her even more careless. The developer had given her a deadline. If the business wasn't closed and the property vacated in 3 months, the deal was off. I knew I had to escalate. I had to land the killing blow. Through my blog's email, I reached out to Marcus Thorne, the city's most influential and feared food critic. His reviews had the power to make or break a restaurant. I sent him an anonymous tip linking to my blog. I told him the story of the sunny side was more than just bad food, it was about the soul of our city. 2 weeks later, he walked in. I spotted him immediately. He was unassuming, but I had seen his picture online. He sat in a corner booth, the one where Grams and I used to sit and do the crossword puzzle together. Maria's eyes met mine from across the room. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was showtime. Carol, of course, had no idea who he was. She treated him with the same dismissive impatience she showed everyone. The stage was set. He ordered the classics, the sunrise special, 2 eggs, bacon, home fries, and toast, and a slice of the apple pie. Graham's signature dishes. It was the ultimate test. My hands were shaking as I stood at the griddle. This was it. The moment of truth. All my anger, my grief, my love for this place, it all came down to this one meal. I could have cooked it perfectly. I could have shown him a glimpse of what the sunny side used to be. A part of me, the part that still ached for my grandmother, wanted to. But then I looked out and saw Carol snapping at Maria. I saw the cheap, flimsy menus, the soulless pop music playing on the speakers. I remembered the forged signature and the word teardown. And I made my choice. I cooked him the worst meal of my life. I used the greasiest part of the griddle for his eggs, making sure they were slightly rubbery. I used the thinnest, saddest strips of bacon Carol had bought, cooking them until they were brittle and tasted of old oil. I deliberately undercooked the potatoes, leaving them hard and starchy in the middle. The toast was burnt on the edges and pale in the center. It was a masterpiece of culinary malpractice. For the grand finale, the apple pie, I did something I'd never done before. I microwaved it. Grams would have spun in her grave. I served it on a chipped plate, a lukewarm, soggy slice of what was once the best pie in the city. I watched as Marcus Thorne took a few bites of each item, his face a mask of professional neutrality. He made a few notes in a small black book, paid his bill in cash, and left. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days. I was racked with a terrible combination of guilt and anticipation. What if my plan didn't work? What if I had just hammered the final nail in my own diner's coffin for nothing? The review came out on Friday, on the front page of the newspaper's lifestyle section. The headline was brutal: "The sun has set on the sunny side." Thorne didn't hold back. He described the meal in excruciating detail, calling it a culinary travesty and an insult to the memory of its founder. He didn't just critique the food, he critiqued the atmosphere, the service, the soullessness of it all. He mentioned the rumors he'd read on a certain popular blog, the Greasy Spoon Diaries, and confirmed that the reality was even worse than the stories. He ended the review with a heartbreaking line: "The sunny side diner is not just dead, its grave has been danced upon." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The review was all anyone talked about. The developer, whose company was very conscious of its public image, pulled out of the deal that same day. He couldn't afford to be associated with the public outcry and the bad press of tearing down a beloved, albeit failing, landmark. I walked into work the next morning to find Carol in a full-blown meltdown. She was screaming into her phone, surrounded by copies of the damning review. When she saw me, she threw a newspaper at my head. "This is your fault," she shrieked. "All of you. You're all incompetent." She was a cornered animal. The developer was gone. The diner was worthless. Her get-rich-quick scheme had evaporated. She was left with a failing business, a mountain of debt from the cheap renovations she'd made, and a reputation as the woman who had destroyed a city institution. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign went up in the window. The asking price was laughably low. She wasn't selling a business, she was trying to unload a toxic asset. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had spent the last few months not only saving every penny I earned but also working with a small business advisor, a friend of a friend. I had drafted a meticulous business plan for revitalizing the diner. I detailed my culinary experience, my deep roots in the community, and my vision for restoring the sunny side to its former glory. Armed with my plan and a co-signature from Maria, who offered up her own modest life savings as collateral, a local credit union gave me a small business loan. I made an offer, a lowball offer, well under her already pathetic asking price. It was all I had. Carol's lawyer called me the next day. She accepted. She had no choice. The day I signed the papers and got the keys back was the quietest, most profound day of my life. I walked into the empty diner. My diner. It was a mess. It was tarnished. But it was mine. I stood in the center of the room, the keys cool and heavy in my palm. The ghosts of the past few months were there, the anger, the deceit, the sabotage. I had won. But it was a strange, complicated victory. I had to destroy my home in order to save it. I had to tarnish my grandmother's legacy to protect it. Maria came and stood beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Leo," she said softly. "You brought it home." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. Now the real work begins. We spent the next month cleaning, scrubbing, and exorcising the ghost of my aunt. We threw out the cheap ingredients, the plastic menus, the soulless decor. I found Graham's old recipe book, its pages stained and soft with use. I called back the old staff, and they returned without hesitation. We haven't reopened yet. The grand reopening sign is still waiting to be painted. Last night, I stood alone in the kitchen, the newly polished chrome gleaming in the soft light. I heated up the griddle, just like Graham's used to. I cracked an egg one-handed and listened to the familiar, comforting sizzle. The blog is still up. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. My last post, titled "A New Dawn," simply showed a picture of the old, worn key in my hand. The comments section is a flood of joy and relief. They think a passionate local saved the diner, a heroic stranger who swooped in at the last minute. No one knows it was the same person who helped bring it to its knees. My revenge was a success. My aunt is gone, her legacy soured forever in this town, and I have my home back. But as I stand here in the quiet of my kitchen, I have to wonder, would Grams be proud of the fight I won, or would she be heartbroken by the battle I chose to wage? Did I save her love letter to the world, or did I just scribble my own angry postscript on it? Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.